There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner. We're going to have a slightly shorter episode tonight, but we have three excellent coaches here that are going to talk all about fear in your fight. So I'm going to hand it off to Brannos to get us started.
All right. Well, we have a interesting subject tonight. I think it's a subject that we've talked, or at least talked around quite a bit for the past few years in most of our episodes, to tell you the truth. Some of that there was an episode, I think, on emotion and things like that. And fear is one of those really hard emotions that's really kind of impossible to get rid of, but something you can tame. And then we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. Tonight we have Viscount Tristan and Viscountess Bess, and we're talking about some of the impact that we have seen from the Coach's Corner. Bess is our friendly neighborhood coach that seems to get all of our great comments thrown at her, which is wonderful that people feel comfortable and can reach out to her and talk about that. But we want to just say thanks to everybody for listening, for taking some of the stuff and trying it in your group. Hopefully you see some success with it. And I believe Tristan was even talking about maybe an episode where we talk, maybe pull some people in and talk about the successes we got out there, and maybe how do we go forward on those things. And we'll try to kind of put something together, and maybe in the future we'll pull some more folks in to talk about what they've been doing at their practice. But tonight,
the beauty of having a living project that's evolving as we do it.
It really is, and it's been great because we get a lot from the website, from SCA Coaches Corner on Facebook as well. So, it's really, these are the ideas and the things that you guys have been posting that we get to cover. So we truly thank you guys for all of that. So tonight's episode is about fear, as Her Highness said. My fear was that we weren't going to be able to broadcast tonight because we are filling up. Our coaches are taking other jobs by winning crowns and such. So it's been getting difficult. But I got past that fear and ran right into digging in and kind of taking a look around about a lot of things. I know I work at practice a lot about trying to help people be confident. And I think that confidence is directly something regarding, trying to get them away from having a fear around performance. And that's a big thing. It really, it takes some time to do that. So we're not going to give you anything that's going to be an overnight, hey, I'm fixed. But these are the things that you would understand better than it's easier to get past it in the future. So I'm going to just go ahead and talk about a couple of start this and kind of get to a point where let's talk about what is fear of fighting, right? I mean, there's a number of fears of fighting, and I'm just going to throw some out there and then we'll just talk about it a little bit. We were talking about before we jumped on the fear of getting hit, right? The fear of getting hurt, the fear of failure, the fear of loss. And the failure and loss can be two different things. Failure is usually a little bit more about how it affects you. Loss is sometimes that's a little more ego driven. Self-esteem, what does, kind of that fear of what happens to your self-esteem when you lose or when you don't perform well. Fear of embarrassment. That's a big one. So, those are just a few, to talk about. There's probably more. Tristan, let's talk about the fear of getting hit or getting hurt. And Bess has a lot on this one. We were just talking about that. But let's talk about those two.
Yeah, she's going to be our finisher on this one.
Yeah.
But I think that the fear of getting hit is probably the first one that brand new fights encounter, because they just have no concept. And I have this even in my dojo when I teach martial arts, of the idea that you learn to get hit, because a lot of people have never been punched, they've never been hit with a stick. They don't know what armor does for you. And I remember being at a demo many years ago, and it was at a college, and of course you had people walking by and they were interested, like, oh, that looks really cool. And so I'd say, well, I'm gonna put on my armor and I'm gonna let you hit me in the head. And usually these people were so shy, they just tap you with the sword, be like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. It was even their fear, not to say that they were going to get hurt, but the idea that they could hurt somebody else was a part of that fear. And of course, at a demo, you never want to put a helmet on a passerby, and say, I'm going to hit you now, so you get to feel what armor's like. But once they get to that first practice, or they want to get into the experience, they get committed. There's anxiety there. There's, I think, real fear because your brain does not naturally accept getting hit with a stick. And it doesn't understand what armor really does for you. You can't relate what that's like, unless there is previous experience to go on. Maybe somebody played football and they knew that in a helmet they could run into somebody full blast and they aren't going to get hurt. So I think that's probably the first and most tangible one that fighters will run into. And then, of course, they get the butt wrap and they figure out that, oh, my, can be pain related with this sport. And that makes it, I think, a pretty strong impression.
All right, Bess.
Gosh, pressure's on now, guys.
I know. That's okay. We were having an argument with Bess, about this, actually. And she is actually 100% right. And let's definitely talk about the couple of things you did talk about earlier.
So I was thinking of the episode and what we were going to be talking about. And what I came up with, there are two types of fear. One is the physical fear, like, I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get damaged. And the other fear is a psychological fear. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want people to think less of me. I don't want to be a stinky fighter. I don't want to get one-shotted. So for me, I look at this as there are two types of fear. The first type of fear, the physical fear, I feel can be addressed more easily than the second type. The first type being afraid of getting hit, because you can put more padding on your armor. You can wear more stuff. I used to follow my bruises around with my armor, but I think I think that's one of the things that we will be talking about, is because I know Brannos feels that overcoming the fear of being physically hurt is also a psychological consequence. I think it's a different thing, and I think that's the easy thing to address.
And I guess the big piece there is it doesn't have to be different. For me, the idea of of that fear, I think, and Tristan, you nailed it a little bit. This really is mostly in regards to newer people as they first come in the SCA, or somebody who got an injury and is coming back. That fear is subconscious, and you have to work through that. And some of that is exactly as Beth said. Some of that is get better gauntlets. If your hands got destroyed, or you're afraid to get hit, or it hurts, get better armor that hopefully takes that out. I'm not a big proponent of putting more armor on all the time, because I think sometimes it's a handicap. It handicaps you sometimes if the armor doesn't fit well. And then the second piece is it covers up maybe what a bigger problem is. So, and that bigger problem could be you don't block it right, or so on.
See, I think for people who are new, you just put on that armor. You just don't be afraid of getting hit. You wear as many hockey pads as you want until you get comfortable with being hit, and comfortable knowing that you're not going to be hurt. Although getting hit is kind of weird, you just put on whatever you want. The new kids, you just do that. And I will give them as much stuff as they want or need, so they don't have a fear of it. Because how can you become a better fighter if you're afraid of the very thing that we do, which is getting hit?
I think the trick there, Bess, is you get people used to it. First, you create a safe place where they can go out and they don't have to worry about being struck with something that's going to hurt them. That's foam. That does include armor, but we don't have to be careful. You have to be careful about putting too much armor or too poor fitting armor on people, because then you can sacrifice the ability for them to learn and do good technique. So, you know, usually what the best bet is to create a safe place where they feel comfortable about coming back to all the time. And then you build out of that safe place. Sometimes, a lot of times, what I'll do is we'll start in foam, and then I'll transition them to rattan, and I'll still use foam, because then they can start getting that feel like, well, they can hit me with rattan and feel comfortable with rattan, and then it becomes easier to go back. The other piece that feeds into that is prepare them, teach them how to block, teach them how to throw, teach them how to move, get the fundamentals down so they don't feel like they're lost when they first go into a fight and just, you know, geared up like a giant teddy bear trying to walk out there and just get slugged on and never really get confidence, even though it may not hurt. So,
you know, and I think that's probably the biggest mistake that the SCA has made over the years. And it's understandable why they made that mistake. But if you went in to learn boxing, they are not going to, on the first day, put you in a ring with an experienced boxer and fight at full contact. They just will not do that. And if you train to box, yes, you probably do some sparring, but you'll probably wear headgear so that you can and do light contact to get acclimated to using the tools, the movement, the counters, the strikes, so that you don't build up a fear that later has to be coached out of you, which is very hard to do. Once that's settled in too deeply, it can be very hard to extract.
This is a great comment. I wanted to throw it up there, and you'll see other comments pop on the page. Our producer is going to kind of pop good comments out there. I like this one because this is 100%. What's great about combat sports in general is that there's nowhere to hide from yourself. And that's a great comment, because we learn more about ourselves inside of that. And fear and controlling fear and dealing with our fear is a huge thing, not only in our sport, but outside of it. We have fear of being in front of people. We have fear of talking in front of people. We have fears all over the place. And if we just go away from them all the time, we never head on deal with what our problems are and our fears. So I think
we should always respect the people that have the fortitude to do it, because you do present a certain vulnerability. And I've seen people that have come into SCA fighting as well as come onto the mat with martial arts, and they quit because they don't have the stomach to face that vulnerability. They don't want to expose it. They don't want to face themselves. They feel more comfortable not being that vulnerable. And so it takes great courage to continue on, and you wind up facing your inner self and the flaws that you have within you. And if you press on, often you will defeat and eliminate those flaws, or at least minimize them to a great deal. So it's very respectable. No matter, if you see somebody struggling, realize they're at least trying, they're working on it, and they haven't given up.
Actually,
all right, so let's talk about.
I wanted to say something. Hang on.
Okay.
It's all about me. Tristan, you raised a really valid point there, and I would like to elaborate a little bit on this. I was thinking again about the show is, in addition to fighting, I also make garb, and I do garb at home by myself. So when I screw up, and I have to rip out seams, and if you've made garb or if you do woodworking or anything else, you do it at home, you screw up, you're not perfect. Nobody knows about it. Nobody sees it except you. Fighters, from day one, as you're learning your craft, as you're doing everything, you are on display for like all the world, which is, your fight practice group. And that's I think that's a really hard thing. When I make garb, I can practice and get better here at home by myself, silently, with nobody seeing my mistakes, unless I mock myself on Facebook or my friends tell me, don't cut after 10. By the way, don't cut fabric after 10. And when we are at fight practice, we have to do it with somebody else. And it's such a big thing. Everything that we do is in front of somebody else. And I think that's something I think new fighters and experienced fighters too need to recognize. Some days we don't have the luxury to do this in privacy. And I think that's big.
No,
It
I
is.
agree.
In fact,
I think
a
go ahead.
number of times over the years, I've had people approach me and say, I'd rather not try to learn at a practice. Can you and I just get together privately and you can go over things with me and show me so that, and I always sense that there is a delicate vulnerability of, I don't want to look foolish, or, I'd rather do this as close to being in private as possible.
I have actually experienced that myself. I've got somebody who wants to fight, but has said, I want to be good when I get to practice, but you
Right.
can't, because you're not fighting now. So I've given them some things that they can try at home, but the reality is you're gonna be not terrific when you first start. And it's a real vulnerability. You have to be willing to put it out. I'm not going to be very good. I'm going to trip over my feet. I'm not going to be able to coordinate all my body parts. And you've got to do it from day one. And that's really hard. And it does. Tristan, I think you mentioned courage. And I agree. It takes courage to be willing to do that to yourself. It takes courage to go back week after week, feeling like you're being goofy and messing up like that, because that's the only way to get better.
So I think we're actually already in, and we're already in the failure, losing, and really self-esteem is what you're talking about there. It's like, you don't want to lose that what you have of your own self-esteem by looking poorly on the feet, looking like you're tripping over your own feet, right? Because that affects your self-esteem, and your self-esteem affects how confident you are in something, and that confidence can take care of fear a lot of times. So, that failure of loss, or not living up to your belief about yourself. I mean, I'm the greatest man on earth, and then I lose. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm not so great. And then I lose again. I'm like, oh, shit, I'm going downhill. It's so you got all of that, you're tearing down yourself. But, I'm going to tell you, the great fighters, that's what they search for. They search for those losses because they see them as challenges, because they see it as a failure and what they can do to fix the next thing. And that's the way you have to, the best thing is that's what you want to deal with. That's the way you want to search it. We have some great boxers and they'll bang it out and then they take their first loss and they continue losing from there because they never get past it. They realize they're not invincible anymore. And
even within a fight, they can do that. They can go for 2 or 3 rounds and be dominating. And then something happens, they get knocked down and they just never recover. They lose the fight, right? It can happen that quickly.
Yep. And then you look at someone like Pacquiao, who doesn't care. He's lost a couple of fights, still one of the best fighters in the world at his age, which is amazing. And he's lost fights, but he doesn't matter. He sees those as challenges. He's like, hey, I got put down with a body shot. Now he does so much body work that nobody's going to put him down with a body shot. Right. And those are the ways that other people look at that losing idea or failure idea. Losing is a little bit different, at least, the fear of losing a lot of times, and somebody pointed it out here, is the fear that kind of losing honor, you're kind of a slap in your ego. If you're a knight, well, you shouldn't lose that much. If you're a royal peer, well, maybe you shouldn't lose hardly at all. So fights become difficult. You start not fighting. We see this. Champions in boxing, even I've seen a lot of kings do this. They go through a reign and then they get out of that reign and they can't take the loss, so they compete below the level they used to because the ego can't handle taking that loss. And that's a dangerous place to go, because what happens is now you're competing at this level and now you have to go down a level next so that you can still win. And the next thing you know, you're at the very bottom and either you're quitting, hanging your stuff up, or you're tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, I need to restart again.
Yeah.
So Brannos, you say these things, and Certain Golf also says you have to kill your ego if you truly want to learn, and let your losses fuel your training. I say these things too, but the reality is this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I've had to come back myself from a couple of really tough injuries I thought that maybe I wouldn't be able to come back from. And I have gone to practice and it's been horrible. It's been ego shattering. I mean, and I sit there and I think, wow, look at all the stuff I learned tonight. And as Ron Valder says, you have to change your victory conditions. And I also say that. And these are easy words to say, but they're incredibly difficult to live and to do. And I want to point that out as we're talking about these things. We say these things, we know these things. I say these things, I know these things, but they're really hard to live. They're really hard to absorb. It's hard for me as a Royal Peer tonight. Brannos, you were talking about that. When I come back from an injury and I don't fight as well as I think I should, or as somebody said to me on Tuesday, I'm coming back from an injury right now, and somebody said to me, yeah, Bess, you're really telegraphing. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, it was all I could do to get out on the field. Thanks for putting that out to me too. But I am trying hard to say I can be injured and coming back, and I can know that coming back I'm telegraphing. So I am trying to say thank you to the people in my mind. I'm trying to say thank you for telling me I'm telegraphing, because this is something we're all hurt, we're all injured on occasion. We all have to come back from it. So again, easy to say, hard to do, and I'm living proof of that. It's brutal. So I just thought I would jump in with that comment.
So we already kind of went through embarrassment a little bit. I'm going to throw out something before we get into fear's effects. But the kind of three main triggers is oversensitivity. So we have to watch that a little bit. Uncertainty in our fighting ability, that totally affects us. And kind of the testimony or participation in a fight that the outcome in the past was bad. And that, in other words, you're walking into a fight where you're already in fear that they're just going to beat you up again. The idea of walking onto the field already losing. Mm-hmm. So just be aware. Those are kind of three things. If you find yourself in those places, it's something something that you have to work on.
Can I add in one that I remember from years ago? And this does not happen very often, but I've had it happen. I've seen it both in the SCA and in a martial arts setting. And that is when somebody who's really big and powerful, strong, usually some kind of a former athlete, one thing that I've seen happen is they're afraid they're going to hit too hard. And they tend to come out and they hit really super light. Like they don't want to hurt anybody. They realize they may be facing somebody who's much smaller than they are and more frail. And that is something that they'll get to learn what good calibration is. But in that time where they aren't sure, they can be afraid of hurting someone.
Man, I have seen that more than once, man. And actually, a number of them have a hard time in their whole career getting past that.
Yeah, it can be a fear that's, because I'm sure with people that are really strong and powerful, especially with a martial background, and they know what they can do. Maybe they played football, or they like playing rough, and they know what they're capable of. Especially with you play football. Generally, you're playing against people that are around your size and athletic ability, and now you get into a sport where you could be facing someone half your size, and you're concerned. It comes from a good place. You don't want to be responsible for hurting another person, but it's a problem to get over.
And especially if you have hurt somebody before, it's even bigger. So
absolutely. Yep.
Let's talk about fear's effects. And I guess I'm going to start with just a couple here, and then we can kind of dig through more and see what you guys think some of the effects are. I'm going to start with just a few. And one is fear. We know fear raises the number of heartbeats that you have, which also then as that goes up, your body seeks more oxygen for that blood as it goes through. And that leads to faster breathing or uncontrolled breathing, which causes fatigue, right? So, there's one example of where we feel the effects of what fear can do to you. And that goes both sides. One is receiving that fear and knowing how to manage that. And if you find yourself in those places, then there's work to be done. And also instilling it as a good fighter can instill that in somebody else and drive them into those places, drive their heartbeat up, drive their breathing faster. and then tear them down mentally and physically with threat. So you guys have some other kind of things. I mean, I know there's,
I think at least for what I've experienced myself, when I started to learn fighting, and to me, fear caused, for one thing, hesitation. You doubt yourself. And so it causes you to lose that good flow of decision-making, analytics, that sort of thing. And then it also causes you to second guess yourself. Whenever you do think of, okay, maybe I should try this. And then that fear says, well, maybe you shouldn't, because you're probably, this isn't going to work the way that you think it is. So that self-doubt starts to come out from that fear. And then, of course, when we're in a frightened state, we think about protecting ourselves, which means you tend to go defensive. And which, as we know, if you're going to win a fight, you have to have offense. You can't just sit and wait. And so it does affect you from a tactical standpoint, or I guess you'd call it strategic or what have you. But I think it keeps you out of that flow state. And we've had the book review, some of the review of Musashi's material. And I think what he was talking about with the void was a complete lack of fear, total flow state of you do not let your mind get in the way. And fear is one of the methods that you let your mind get in the way. Overthinking is another one. But I think fear is one of the first mind killers. If you want to take a little Frank Herbert quote in there.
Yep. There we are.
Yeah.
Well, Bess, what are you afraid of? How does it affect you?
Well, I think it can affect. I just want to, like, you guys are talking about the physiological responses, but I think there's a different response. Of course, I think there's a different response. I think when people become afraid, that it can ultimately drive them away from fighting altogether. When you're afraid to do something, you don't want to do it for whatever reasons. So I don't really want to fight in melee because I'm afraid I'll get hurt. I don't want to go to practice because I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid. And eventually you stop doing the things that you used to like, and fear drives you away from that. So I think that's something to be aware of, that fear can stop you from doing something that you're actually enjoying because you're afraid of what might happen. I know for myself, when it comes to tournament and melee, and by God, I love melee and wars, I'm always nervous. I'm not afraid, but I am quite nervous ahead of time. But if I just listen to my body, that adrenaline and my heart beating really fast, and the anxiety that I have before both tournament and melee, I might never step on the field. But I do know that once I step on the field, my anxiety and nervousness tends to go away once the fighting starts. So there are lots of long-term ramifications of fear, which is to drive you away, and the short-term ones that Brannos, you and Tristan were talking about. So I think it's good to be able to identify what fear is doing for you. So if you find that I don't know, your heart's racing, maybe you can practice deep breathing. And I know that sounds so woo-woo zen, but it actually works. I'm not a big believer, if you're a watcher of or a frequent viewer of Coach's Corner, I don't believe in a lot of stuff that I call woo-woo, but deep breathing can help you. And if you just focus on something different, like sometimes when I'm in a situation, either at work or driving or just something where I have anxiety, I deliberately think, what are my little toes doing? And then I'm like, because nobody knows what their little toes are doing. So then I start thinking about what's my little toe doing? And I distract my mind. And if I can distract my mind, then I have no fear left, because I'm busy being distracted, wondering what the hell my little toes are doing. And so I would recommend thinking about things that you can do. Like I say, for myself, I work on distraction and I try breathing. Somebody else, one of you viewers might have something else that you do. Maybe you like to have a routine. We've talked about routines. So
I think, Bess, you're already jumping into, getting to know your fears and stuff that.
Okay,
already.
I'll stop now.
You're kind of past the effects of fear.
Sorry.
Can I jump in with one too?
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a great lecture that I heard by a guy named Eric Edmeades, and he's got a lot of stuff on YouTube, but he talks about how to learn how to speak in public. He said, and this is one of the biggest fears that a lot of people have, is going up in front of a group of people and speaking. And he ran across this study that a lot of these public speakers, in order to deal with their nerves and anxiety, before they would go on, they would smoke a cigarette. And this study wanted to find out, was it the cigarette or was it the breathing that helped? And the study found that the act of smoking, where you take in a deep breath and breathe out, it wasn't the nicotine or the tobacco smoke. It was the act of taking a deep breath. And they found that when they studied people with anxiety, that just doing the breathing, imagining like you were smoking, or just taking a few of those deep breaths, even 2 or 3 is enough. You don't need to turn into like half an hour breathing exercise to get the benefit of having it start to calm you. And I thought that was fascinating. And this was a method that a lot of public speakers use to overcome that anxiety. And I think anxiety like that is similar to what we have in the SCA with performance anxiety. Of all methods, is that breathing part can change things very quickly.
Yep, and we'll talk about more of that in a bit here too. And I would totally agree. I think another layer probably that's happening inside of smoking that cigarette is smoking the cigarette for somebody that smokes all the time is a very comfortable place. So it relaxes you. It's almost like meditation. And what's in meditation, we talk about breathing in meditation. Smoking brings you in a state where you're not thinking about anything else, and you're breathing as well. And so you're creating a really calm state to bring that fear back down. So just a couple other things on the other effects. I think this, Tristan covered the freezing while you're fighting directly impacts your movement and stuff. 100%. I mean, you know, if you have fear in you, you tend to tense up. That will slow down your reactions, your offensive and defensive reactions, slow down your thoughts, and then then you start losing.
Accelerate your exhaustion too,
and then your exhaustion accelerates your game plan. Your thinking slowly goes away from your game plan and enters into survival mode, and you're no longer thinking about the fight. You're thinking about surviving. After a while, you get to a point where you're not sure that the whole survival mode thing tends to peak really high and fast. And then once you can't do nothing in that space, then you start entering the end of the fight zone. In other words, you look for your way out. And that's there are a lot of boxers that take blows because they're just ready to be done. And there's a lot of SCA people that will take a blow because they're like, I can't hit you. Everything I've done trying to hit you, I can't breathe anymore. So anything that touches me,
I've exhausted my arsenal, and now I've got
right.
What else? I don't have anything else left.
We see that in MMA a lot, and on chokes. There are guys that can live through a choke, right? I mean, they'll fight through a choke. They'll keep fighting through a choke. But if you already beat them, if you already beat their mind, then they're just looking for their way out, and they'll take that choke, right? So, they'll tap, and that's kind of some of the effects that can be used. And here's a quote from something is like, what separates champions from an average fighter is the ability to control emotions and fear. Every great fighter has the ability to stop the emotions from turning into fear and panic. And that's the truth. Controlling emotion, and my guys are tired of hearing it, is like emotion has, and I know everyone's going to jump on this giant bandwagon, and it's like, you have to have emotion in fight. Emotion has no place in a fight, right? There's a job to be done, and you drive through that job most effectively as you can. And the less emotion, and this includes after you win, and you'll find, and Tristan, I'm sure you see this all the time in martial arts. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to not be afraid in the front end, and be disappointed with loss. But you're also not supposed to be excited about win. You're not supposed to, jump up and down and be super excited, because that's emotion as well.
And I've never heard an instructor say, yeah, that keeping a cool head, don't really worry about that too much. Just do whatever you want. The more rage you have, the better you're going to do. invariably, no matter how much, and this goes even into combativeness, no matter how hard you're striking or how fast you're hitting, your mind has to be calm. It might seem like your mind is going at the same speed as your elbows and your feet and your knees and your fists, but it's not. It should be calm, as calm as possible. You can't necessarily maintain a total cold-blooded type thing when you're under, mortal danger, but you cannot let that run away and become into panic, because panic will kill you every single time.
Yep, and we talked about this. What? Go ahead.
Well, I have a question. Like, I'm not a guy. I'd like to preface this by saying, not a guy. My understanding is, and you guys help me out, I could be, perpetuating a myth or something. When you get afraid, do you get angry? And then does anger turn into aggression on the field, which could cause, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, I get really mad on the field. And that is an emotion. And I think emotions, as Tristan, you say, a cool head. And I can't help but wonder, some of the guys who say, I fight mad, are possibly, it's a decoy emotion, for lack of a better term, for being afraid. Like, they're afraid, and that turns into anger. Like, you're making me mad, or you're making me afraid, so now I'm mad at you and I want to fight mad. Is that a possibility? I honestly, like, I'm just tossing this out there.
I think they do it because they're trying to bring some of their emotion to cover everything else they have, and not think about it. In other words, if like, I'm going to go kill that guy, and then it's all about what they're using that for is focus, right? Oh. They're using it for focus, and then, I'm going to go kill that guy, and that's all they're on, right? Now, kill that guy. A lot of people say they fight mad. It doesn't mean that they fight dumb or they fight with emotion. What they're saying is, they could be saying that they fight mad. In other words, they're focused so hard that they're out there to prove something, or not even to prove anything. They're out there to do their job, right? Now there is just fighting mad, and that leads into what Tristan talks about and just talked about, and that is, you only have so much of that after a while, and then it falls apart a bit. But
and this touches a bit into adrenaline, because my experience, I've seen fighters that like to use a bit of adrenaline to fight. You can't use a lot of it, but you can, by getting yourself into a slightly, I hate to call it angered, but it's almost like an excited state. You can start that adrenaline process. And there is, to address your question, Bess, there is a difference between how males and females work with adrenaline. Males are built, because we just have been this way forever, and this is how we've survived, is we can dump adrenaline very quickly. Like, it can happen in a half a second. We can go from total calm to adrenaline dump, because we are out, wrestling saber-toothed tigers or whatever, out on a hunt, or having to deal with an attack. And that's kind of the upside, is we can dump that adrenaline quickly, and then we can drop it quickly. Once it comes in and the stress is gone, we can drop back down within 30 seconds even. Women have a different curve. They are slower to have that adrenaline dump into their system. It just does not happen in a few seconds. It takes time under stress to build it up. And once it goes, they have every bit of advantage of that full adrenaline drop that men do. But it doesn't taper off. It doesn't drop off quickly either. I've talked with a number of women that have experienced this adrenaline dump, and they say, I'm on adrenaline for 20 minutes, half hour. It takes a long time for me to calm back down once I'm in that state. Now, I tried this years ago of using adrenaline, and I did it about once or twice and found I did not like it at all. No. It's tempting, because you think that it will make you stronger, faster. It will slow down time. And adrenaline does have those effects on you, but it comes at a very high price. It will exhaust you very, very quickly. It can make you make rash decisions, poor choices. In my opinion, it's not worth the trade-off. But many people, I shouldn't say many, I run into fighters that they like that. They think that it's a good deal, and they've figured out how to manage it so that they don't take on too much adrenaline, but they still like that edge. But but I think that's part of it's fear related, because adrenaline is a byproduct of fear. So you have to, if you're going to bring that adrenaline into play, you have to play with fear a little bit. You have to manipulate yourself into it.
Brannos, earlier you had said that people use adrenaline like or anger, to help them focus. Do you think people can use fear to help them focus?
Yeah, and in fact, that's real quick. We're gonna, because you guys are actually covering the topic already, and that is essentially how we use fear, and you guys were kind of covering that a little bit here, and that is use that fear. You get afraid. Don't let the emotion take you. Let that you get afraid. Then it's like you got to dig down and look the effort you put in, and find your base that you don't have to be afraid anymore. In other words, find your base. It's like, whoa, this person's really good. It's like, okay, I'm going to dig in and perform at the best level I can. Right. The fear of not breaking, for some people, the fear of not breaking a record is very hard, because actually, if you have a fear of it, you probably won't break it. But for others, the fear of not breaking that record kind of can push them past that. It's like they train harder, and this is really where that comes into place. Rungvalder and myself have the fear of, people are like, why, man, you guys go to practice all the time? Because you know why? Because we're afraid to not go to practice. We literally are afraid to not go to practice, because if we miss one, then we're going to miss the second one. We miss that second one, we miss the next one. We miss the next one, now our career is going down the drain after 30 years. So we are literally afraid of missing practice. So use that. Use that to drive you to go to practice. So that's one way to use fear. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's jump into, this is an interesting topic, getting to know your fears. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Probably the first one is learn your fears and accept them. In order to defeat your enemy, you must know who you are fighting against. In other words, know your fear, and then you can defeat it. You can practice things to get around that. So you have to know if your fear is being hit. You blink and you get that little twitch. Stand in front of somebody with a boffer sword and let them constantly hit you in the face for the next hour. Because sooner or later, you're like, okay, you can stop hitting me in the face. You can stop hitting me. You can stop hitting me, in the face. And then all of a sudden, guess what? That fear is not there. A little anger is there, but but that's the idea is know your fears so you can work on them. Mm-hmm. There's a number of others. You guys have some other ideas on kind of getting to know your fears?
Yeah, and it involves honesty. So one of the things I've tried to live my life by is, even if I lie to everybody else, I have to be honest with myself. So I can go to practice and I have to be able to say, I'm afraid of X, Y, or Z, because I'm Canadian. And you need to be, and that requires a lot of honesty, and that's really hard. But you have to look inside yourself to say, what am I afraid of, so that you can focus on it. And that is something that takes a lot of work sort of off the field. And okay, it's woo-woo stuff, but it's my woo-woo stuff, so it's okay woo-woo stuff. But so I think you really need to look at yourself and say, what am I afraid of? I don't like fighting, or I'm afraid of fighting. Well, okay, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of being hurt physically. Okay. I'm afraid of looking stupid. Okay. So then you got to kind of track it down. Well, what does that mean to look stupid? And then how do I feel about it? And I think, like, the one thing everybody says, I don't want to get one-shotted. Nobody wants to be one-shotted. That's the thing that we're all afraid of. And the answer is, and the question you have to say to yourself is, why am I afraid of it? And then you got to look at yourself. So I would, as much as it's hard to do, I recommend everybody look inside to see, what is it that's driving your fear? Because we all have fear of something. For a lot of it, it's a psychological looking stupid, whatever that means for you on the field.
Tristan, what do you got on that?
Yeah, getting to know yourself. That's that's the art of it, isn't it? I mean,
well, and actually, you're right. I love how you say that, Tristan, because a number of articles I read was martial arts makes you get to know yourself, right?
Absolutely. And that's the same thing that I loved about the SCA field, practice field, battlefield, tournament field, is it's basically ultimate truth. You can't hide from yourself. You can't hide from other people. You will show who you are, and other people will show you who they are. And the martial arts mat is the same way. I've had a number of fellow students, not any of my own, but actually, I have had one of my own actually break down in tears on the mat. Yep. Because they wind up facing something inside themselves that they either didn't know was there or they had never really identified it. It was a vulnerability. It was something that they were uncomfortable with, unhappy with, and it was the first step in bringing it out of them. And it can be a process that's kind of like we talked about earlier. It's something that many people are not comfortable with a bunch of people seeing, because it will show your vulnerability. And it feels like it's showing your weakness to people. When in fact, really what's going on is you're finding a part of yourself that really needs to be purged. And the first step is identifying it. And it can come out unexpectedly. You don't know it's coming, and it's suddenly right there. And this can happen to, people that are somewhat new, with a year experience. It can happen to people who've been doing it for 5, 8, 10 years.
100%.
Yeah.
So, and you guys covered a couple other things. It's interesting, getting to know your fears. A couple other things came up. They talked about using, you were talking about using breath to help yourself. And exactly what they talked about was, breathing in isolation will allow your mind to calm itself, and that fear will kind of taper off and not get as sharp. They talk about using visualization. Give yourself 15, 20 minutes of visualization sessions, get comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths, and start thinking about the things that you're afraid of most. Imagine receiving hard strikes, pain, everything that bothers you, so that when you actually go to, and it happens, you're a little more prepared for that. And then use visualization techniques and experience to prepare yourself to fight your fears. You can, make all the fears less intensive if you're confident that you're ready for them. So, take that in as some points on that piece.
I think too, this would be a good point to actually turn this around and say, okay, now you're a coach and you have a student dealing with something like this. What do you do to support them? Or what do you do to, even better, not make it worse by just saying, well, suck it up, buttercup, or toughen up? And, when a student is going through that, obviously it's kind of your obligation to help guide them through, because that's a painful place to be. Maybe Brannos, you could deal with, I'm sure you've dealt with that.
Yeah, let's actually, you're jumping right into two things, Tristan. You're jumping into a question somebody had, Wanda, who actually I know. And we're jumping into how do we help, right? And her questions were, how do you, there we go. How would you recommend a newer fighter bring up fear in an area to appear if they're already feeling vulnerable? In other words, you're brand new, you're already feeling very vulnerable about lots of people are very vulnerable about opening their emotional, well-being to other people, especially people they don't know. And then, and create. So the other question she had was, do you inform them of your poor mental space, or do you become more calm by getting in armor, or do you push through it? Once you're there, you're good. And I think some of the good part is, the help portion of what we're going to give you is going to cover some of these pieces. And I think, Tristan, you're nailing it on the first one is, you have to find a person that you're comfortable with to talk to. And if that's somebody at practice, that's great. If that's somebody that doesn't even fight, a friend, bring your friend, and they can be there to help you, listen to your fears, and help you get in armor and go do it. There's lots of ways to try to get past. Bring your partner. It's those are all techniques. And I think a good coach, and this is not easy. This is really hard because now you have to read people. Now you're going from, hey, I'm a coach, I know how to teach you techniques, to I'm a coach, I know how to work with your brain. And that's not easy. I know how you feel. That's not easy, right? But a good coach, and we've been talking about the difference between coaches and trainers. A good coach understands people and can kind of read them and feel how they feel. And I think finding them,
there's not just one answer to how to solve that problem.
No, absolutely
there's no
not.
one glove that fits every hand.
But I'd say the first thing, and I have a couple points here, is be open. Let others, other people trust, or let other people you trust know your fears. In other words, the more you're open about it, the easier it is to talk to others later. And if you really feel like that's the person I want to work with, but I just can't get there, I can't talk to them about it, find somebody you can talk to about it and ask them to go talk to them about it. I guarantee you that person will come over to you and it's like, hey, I hear you're not feeling great, but you'd like to work on some stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I absolutely do want to work on stuff. Wow, that fear is almost gone already, right? Because and tell you the truth, they had to live over the fear of maybe that a little bit. They're like, ooh, how am I going to handle this? They're afraid too, but they want to help. And know that
one thing I would offer to people too that have some kind of fear they're struggling with, and this is a self-analysis tool. The more you are afraid to talk to people about it, the greater that fear is. If it's just a minor fear and you don't mind talking to your friends about it, or talking to somebody, say, hey, here's what I got going. What do you suggest? It's a smaller fear, and just realize when you try to gauge, all right, how big in scope is this problem? That can be an indicator that, if you just don't want to utter anything about it, it might be something that really needs to be tackled because of that. And Brannos is perfectly right that, first step is find somebody you trust to open up to. And that can be difficult because when you get a fear that's that big in scope, you're going to be vulnerable telling somebody about it. And you want to have at least some confidence that they're not going to just go, you're an idiot, for saying something like that or sharing that fear. But also realize there are very, very few people that would be that callous. Most everybody has got a certain level of compassion, and usually a high level of compassion when somebody wants to share something like that. So
if there is one thing I have learned on Coach's Corner, from talking to you guys and Sean and all the people we've had on, you and we're not unique. All fighters have had fear. All fighters are afraid of looking stupid. All fighters have had something that they're not comfortable with. We've all been there. And, we all think, ooh, I'm all special. Nobody except me in the world has ever had anxiety about fighting. But the one thing that I've learned on this show is that we all have. And if you speak to somebody at your practice about it, or if you ask to speak, hey, if you know me, I like to have a fighter buddy. If you get your fighter buddy to go talk to the person, I think you will see very quickly that not only can the people that you're talking to, will they have the compassion that Tristan talks about, but they can say, oh my God, I can totally relate to that. And they will be able to tell you that they have lived through the fear that you're talking about right now, or that you have right now. Because the reality is we've all gone through the various stages. Some of us just happen to have been in the SCA and fighting for longer than other people. So everybody has been there. Everybody can relate. I am, in point of fact, quite shy about talking about myself, which I know sounds odd, but Coach's Corner has encouraged me, or has given me a platform to be honest, to share with people who watch, so that you can know that you're not alone. And the number of people have come up to me afterwards to say, thank you, has taught me that I'm not alone. So please don't feel that you're alone, feeling your anxiety, your fear, your nervousness, because God knows you're not. Please feel free to talk to somebody, and just to say it. yeah, you know, this is causing me some stress. And they'll be like, I know, right? So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
There's
sorry.
a really good comment here, and I think this is worth just mentioning from Jason.
Yeah.
He said, I go into attorney afraid of failing, embarrassing my wife and everyone who's helped me train. Howdy, can I relate to that one? And I think a lot of fighters do that, especially ones that are going into royal tournaments or you know, a prestigious tournament, and they feel like if they don't perform spectacularly, that they are somehow betraying their fellow fighters or their, you know, their training buddies or their household or you know. And in all my years in the SCA, I've never heard a consort say, well, I really wish you would have done better.
Yep.
I was really expecting more than that. And maybe it's happened, but everybody that I've ever seen has just been thrilled to have somebody representing them. Fighters are thrilled to have their buddy out, you know, fighting in a tournament, doing as best he can. You know, we all do have brain farts. We make mistakes. Things don't go the way that we want them to. Just be careful about how much burden you load on your own shoulders because you didn't perform the way you wanted to.
Yeah, and in fact, it hurt your performance.
All it does is, yeah, it builds a huge brick wall around yourself that eventually, if you're going to learn to perform well, you're going to have to break down.
Yeah. I would say what those people that are understand this, and in one of the books I was reading, a long distance runner was running the Appalachians and setting a record time, the female, not only the female record time, but the male one as well. And she was going to quit halfway through. And, you know, you're running 40, 50 miles a day, and you have to have a support staff. Well, her husband, they took a year off to do this, and her husband was there all along the way. And she stopped. She was shin splints, all kinds of bad things happening to her. So she was like, I think I'm going to quit. And he looked at her like, you can't quit. We did this together. And then she realizes, like, this isn't just about me. It's about them too. And that, you know, it's not that you can't quit. Like, you know, it was that support piece that, you know, that they're there for you. They don't care that set the record. They're there for you through all this training. All they want to see you do is finish what you started, because they want you to be proud in yourself. It doesn't matter if you set the record. It doesn't matter if you win. They just want to be there for you. And I think that's the part to remember when you go in Crown. Winning is great, but to tell you what, you already did the thing they wanted, and that was you went and did something you wanted to do, or you both wanted to do, and you're willing to put yourself out there, and they appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I posted up a bunch in the comments just in case we didn't get to them about help, and another piece besides just create a support staff, and that support staff can be instructors, coaches, mentors, friends, but be consistent. Be consistent about your training, and tell you the truth, your journaling too. And I put journaling in there specifically because sometimes that allows you to write things on paper and really think about them again and see that maybe you didn't do as bad. Maybe there are good things you did. And it also emotionally, it helps you, because if you ever talk to people that work with emotional people who have emotional problems, they talk about journaling all the time because it helps them. And so journaling, being consistent about doing those things, is a really, really good thing to do. Be open to change. You know, and I was like, and actually, I kind of came up with this one because we get, you know, you go and work out and I get comfortable with it. Well, that's easy to get past fear when you're comfortable. The key is you have to get past the fear of change. So the more you change, maybe routine of your practice or your workout, the more you get comfortable with change. And I think, you know, in a fight, you have to be comfortable with the change. You can't just, hey, this is the way I'm going to do it. And then when it breaks down, you're like, I don't want to change now because I'm not comfortable with it, right? I'm going to fear I'm going to lose if I change my style. You have to be able to adapt, and adapting is change. So keep that in mind as well. And the last one I had for that one was take control of your emotions. And I think that's what fear is one of those pieces, but all of your emotions.
Easier said than done, but it has to be done.
Exactly. And the good point about taking care of your emotions really comes around use your practice and use your discipline at practice as your foundation to who you are and what you believe. It's going to creep in your head. It's like, I can't win this one. Well, you fall back onto, you know what? I've been practicing for a year. I'm not just going to go out, thinking I can't win this one. If I don't win this one, it's because I tried my best, right? And I lost. That person bested me, and that's perfectly fine, as long as you didn't lose because you gave up.
Well, and remember, this is not your last day.
Nope.
You're going to take a defeat or a mistake. You're going to turn that into just what Sean talks about. You turn that into making it a list and a priority for the next training that you go into, so that the next time you go out, you won't have that deficiency anymore. I mean, that's just the process. So I like to say, everything is a practice, and everything is the real game. So when you're at the real game, think this is just like a practice. I'm going to go and, execute, and don't let your brain overstress yourself.
All right. So Bess, you have any last things there? It's 9:00. I think that's a short show tonight, everybody. I hope we went through a lot of stuff. I really enjoyed the kind of talking about a lot of this. And it's interesting because I think we all kind of just led into the next thing here, even though we had it was like one thing led to the next thing, led to the next thing. Nice. Oh, that's awesome. So just some final words. It takes some time for one to overcome the fear of fighting. Like everything in life, it requires energy, patience, and dedication. This is right from another martial artist out of MMA specifically. And as a martial artist, we have to battle against our fears at some point. Every one of us. We're all, and Bess said this earlier. I mean, this nailed it. That's what's saying it. I'm like, sure, wrap up the show now. And we all share similar fears. And you're not none of us are any different. You may think that, but the person you're going to open up to because you're afraid is probably just as afraid that that they're not going to show you something or not going to be able to help you. And it doesn't matter if they're wearing a hat, a belt, or whatever. They have their own fears. They're afraid that they're not going to win their next fight because they don't want to, and they don't want to disappoint you because you go to fight practice and they train you. So now they can't lose because, well, if they lose, they're not as good a trainer, which is a bunch of bullshit. And it's so don't be afraid. We're all, fear is something. It's just how we deal with it. And I think that's the biggest point of all of this, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to wrap up with just keep a sense of proportion. We're playing a game. Don't take yourself so seriously and put so much demand that you must win. Remember, we do this for fun, or we should be doing this for fun. Maybe not to the point where you don't care how you perform, but balance out the fact that you're doing something you love, you enjoy doing it, it's fun to do for its own sake. Yes, you want to do better, but don't let yourself become so obsessed that you get in your own way.
100%. So actually it was interesting because somebody had brought up some anxiety of going to a crown tournament, anxiety of going to practice. And so there's a couple of videos I'm starting to watch on this, and I'll throw them out on the YouTube page once it comes up. But we're going to have a quick 1 hour talk about anxiety. We may not do it on a Friday night show. We may cut that separately, and then just throw it up, on our SCA Coaches Corner Facebook page for people to watch, and out on the YouTube page. But I thought anxiety was one of those pieces I think we have to talk about at some point.
Absolutely.
So watch this. I'm going to throw one right at Bess. Bess, what's next week?
Gosh, you know what? I'm not certain.
Okay, I am. So
Jerk.
she has now. I'm instilling the fear that I'm going to ask this every time to her. That's what's happening here.
You know what's funny is I usually chat just in
I
case.
know. All right. So next week is actually Thanksgiving. I hope everybody has a great holiday, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be gone, but we're going to be on. We're going to do. We kind of started this a couple years ago, and that's what we're thankful for a little bit. And this time, we're thankful to our guests, and I think we're going to invite some guests to come on the show. And Tristan, this is pretty much what you talked about before the show. Is like,
we kind of touched on this.
Right.
Let's have a live chat. Who wants to come, and instead of typing in comments, we can actually get them on air.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you show up to next week and you have something you want to talk about that you got out of Coach's Corner and thankful that you were here and it's used at practice or something, join us and we'll throw you on screen a little bit. You can tell us what you did in a short order. And then we'll keep moving on through a couple different people. So we're hoping this is different. So we're hoping it's going to work. If it doesn't, we tried. So,
we're not afraid.
Oh, well, I am a little. Anyways. Okay. Well, thanks to everybody. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there. Buffalo, I hope you dig out by the time next week is. Look like anywhere from 2 to 5 feet of snow there coming. And and it was great seeing everybody. Thank you, Al, for coming out. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.